Hello and welcome again to CTRL+F, the NSI Cyber and Tech Centers podcast. This season, we're bringing you a series of sessions from one of the nation's leading cyber events, the National Cyber Innovation Forum. My name is Andrew McClure, the president of the National Cyber Innovation Forum. In this episode, we continue into part 2 of a conversation with senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, Laura Galante, the Director of Security and Intelligence with the State of New York, Colin Ahern, the Head of Cyber and National Security Policy at Anthropic, Bair, the President of Schellman, Doug Barbin, and the President of Forescout Government Systems, Mike Walsh. Stay tuned for more discussion on how organizations are securing critical infrastructure, governing frontier AI, strengthening assurance, and improving visibility across cyber physical environments to build resilience and maintain trust in an era of persistent cyber threats.
Yeah, let me follow on that point for a second, Doug, and ask you this. I think there's a growing sense that risk via cyber, but through kind of your digital estate, is maybe how I'll put what you're getting after, isn't just an episodic issue, right? You're not just going to have a cyber attack. You're not just going to have an outage. Think back to the CrowdStrike outage 2 years ago. Those are small sort of they're huge but consequential in temporally small events that companies have to play with. But the shift that I think organizations now are seeing is I don't want to manage risk in these episodic sort of response functions. I need to do this continually for operations. And that's a different mindset. It's a whole lot more like defending, a military base or intelligence equity, something where you're continually under threat. So how are you seeing that through the lens of how companies are asking you to evaluate their programs?
Sure, great question. I think from our perspective, we've seen a shift in the way, and I will say, call it the more mature companies and organizations are managing compliance in the sense that it's not about auditing or attesting to a particular set of controls. It's not, these are the 5 things that we have in place that constitutes our security program, right? These are the processes, these are the technologies that are self-learning, that are making the decisions for us every day. And we're looking at those systems, at those decisioning systems, because that's what creates continuous compliance. I know that's a buzzword that gets used a lot, but it's about having the constant data telemetry of what's happening and being able to respond to it in real time. And in certain cases, AI is already responding to some of those things that were manual processes in place, which is great. It gives the security teams the bandwidth to be able to do more high-end function, to do more strategy and threat modeling and planning, right?
Excellent. Mike, moving over to you at Forescout. So Forescout's been, in the scheme of cybersecurity companies' lifetimes, now old enough to drink and more, right? 25 years or so. So, you've been through a few different cycles of how you think through cybersecurity products play to be able to meet the threat. It's a game changer with what we're seeing around AI. Can you take me to a more strategic level on how Forescout and how cybersecurity companies are going to need to change the conversation around some of the principles of vulnerability management? I know folks are talking about patching here and got into a little bit of that debate before, but we're not going to patch our way out of the moment we're in. We're not going to EDR or XDR our way out of the moment we're in. So, give us some perspective from what you've seen over the years on where the paradigm shift on managing a security program is going and how you think that's going to look.
Are you trying to get me fired?
Sorry.
So first of all, let's start with today rather than 25 years ago. So if you look at AI for MSPs, there's a real hope that we'll have what Nick Anderson called automation of action. Because right now we suck at patching because we don't really have a chain of automation that takes care of everything that's on a desktop or server. It doesn't really matter what it is. The infection vector has not changed. The number one place to get infected is through your printer. It hasn't changed. Everybody knows this. Do we care? Nobody seems to care because nobody's responsible in a lot of places. And by a lot of places, I mean we have hundreds of millions of endpoints that we work with as part of our vulnerability detection. Okay, That's nice, Mike, but what's it got to do with anything? What it has to do with is that we are about to change the entire paradigm of management. And that's what's happening right now, is that things that were segmented before inside of our org chart are about to get ripped apart. And the new world is going to be, well, at least by noon today, will be a bunch of reorganizations that continually happen inside of our customers' shops. It's happening now. Let me just revisit the MSP conversation. So if you look at the AI startups that are out there, what they're pitching to critical infrastructure companies, the local, as we talked about, county power supply, those guys use an MSP. The MSPs are using better technology today than we've ever had before. Probably it's the largest organizations. That's the one that's really the problem.
Talk to me about what the large organization's problem is, though.
Well, it's bureaucracy, and it's laws, it's things that are preventing change. Not that there were bad reasons, but the world is now upside down, right? So we have been through, I'm sure I'm supposed to say, well, let's just really fire me this time. So our technology has been examined by the biggest banks who are our customers, and guess what? They happen to meet those users. We know exactly what's going on. The biggest problems that all of us are going to have is the fact that we're going to have to deal with also what Nick brought up, which is the tech debt. We're going to have to write a lot of new code. And it's not a patch, it's new stuff. And I don't know how many people in the federal government have, well, since we're here in DC, in this building, have put together a budget that's going to figure out how to do this investment. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, EOs, but that's, a dream until there's a line item someplace. And I deal with that with banks, power companies, everybody's the same. We want to do it. It's all wishful thinking until there's a budget line item. And let's see one. I want to challenge my customers right now about that.
Great, thank you. I'm going to come back for a little bit of a lightning round for folks on a few other topics. One is the discussion in Europe right now around security spending is in a different place than it was even 3-4 years ago. Cybersecurity and larger defense spending. Part of that's due to the 5% defense budgets that are now required across the board. And there's a cutout of that of something like 1.5% for critical infrastructure. There's a lot of new interested money on the European side trying to do this. And you also got a regulatory environment where you have NIS2 and some of these other pieces saying we're going to try to get serious here about how we do security on our critical infrastructure. I'm curious, I'm going to go to Doug, you and Schellman first on this. How do you see the kind of pacing security questions and spending in Europe being useful and interesting to a US audience here? And what do you think we're going to learn? What do you think we're going to see? And what can Europe not repeat in a good sense?
Wow, so what we've seen is a couple things. One, on the regulatory side, right, which includes some regulations, includes some directives, which are somewhat like executive orders and mandates. But the one common theme that we've seen, especially the last several years, is resilience as the first word before security. And so resilience, I mean, DORA is a resiliency act, right? NIS2 is resiliency and incident response and incident handling for non-banks, for example. You've got the cyber resiliency act. Everything there seems to revolve more around resiliency and availability and the ability to respond. It's comparing it to here, and I think in the U.S. we've gotten more comfortable with this, but there's an assumption that something bad is going to happen, and that you want to be able to respond and recover as quickly as a matter of possible. The other trend, that's trend number one that we see in terms of the focus on resiliency. Trend number two, though, really comes into, people call it data sovereignty, but it's the protection of the data, wanting it to stay within country. And different countries have different approaches and stringent requirements on this. They want it they're not satisfied if it's a virtual environment and an Amazon or a Google or somewhere, regardless of where the data center is. They want it in country, they want it controlled, they want it protected from discovery or any sort of other types of access. So those are the two major things, especially as we work with companies and cloud providers and AI providers that are expanding into Europe, is what are the things that we're thinking about. So I think the move towards resiliency is the right move. I think the data sovereignty, I have to have my data in a particular bucket, is a little too stringent at times, because you can put the right security controls in place in a cloud hybrid environment that doesn't necessarily, it's okay that it's not sitting in your particular country or region. So.
Thank you. Rob, at Anthropic, I'm sure you're getting interest, not just from the US government on how Anthropic plays out and some of the changes in warfare and intelligence and more, but also probably from the Europeans, right? Who are sitting here with the 3 frontier labs in the US and then China, but none really driving in Europe. And there's this question around sovereignty. You're hitting data sovereignty, but really on AI sovereignty, which is maybe more of a shorthand for how are there some levels of control and understanding around implementing AI, implementing model like Anthropic into defense and security agencies in Europe. How are you all approaching that? What questions are you getting?
Yeah, I think the biggest questions are around infrastructure and infrastructure constraints, right? A lot of these models are very compute intensive, as you can imagine, and Western European democracies that we were talking to about defense and intelligence use cases are wondering what not their data centers should look like tomorrow, but what their data centers should look like 5 years from now, so they can budget for it and build it and have the compute capacity to run very advanced models. And then, but that's not just Europe, that's, Asia Pacific as well, right? And having conversations with Asia Pacific partners, and they're curious about partnering with the hyperscalers, what they can do on-prem, which is difficult with these very large models. And so I think, having access to Western models is going to be very important globally, not just for Europe. And we need to figure out how we're going to enable like-minded democracies to do the type of work that we want to enable.
Security and privacy concerns in sort of a different way?
Yeah, totally. The same conversations I was having about, sovereign cloud and sovereign, what does sovereign inference look like for an AI model? And I think we're still figuring that out. And right now, just because of where compute capacity sits, it's really not possible in many ways.
Appreciate it. Colin, I want to go to the state and local level for a second with you here on this, because I think there's an interesting parallel to what's happening on the global stage. But you've got to be able to both implement AI and think through security, again, for Ed, right? But you've also, to your point, but you've also got to deal with some of the political constraints and discussions around the infrastructure behind AI, the build out on data centers, the increased compute needs, energy, water, etc. Can you bring it together for us a little bit on how you think about security in the context of these developments that are happening across the state, and where does your role and what you're doing fit with the rest of the questions that the governor and others are going to be getting around what this next generation of innovation looks like?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I think convergence. It used to be when, us with gray beards started in this business, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, there were one kind of threat that went after one kind of target, and another kind of threat that went after another kind of target. Now, fundamentally, with cryptocurrency, the proliferation of cyber weapons, and especially frontier models and Mythos-like capabilities, the things that separated nation-state adversary from a guy with a laptop are already collapsing, and in a matter of probably months, but certainly not years plural, that distinction will completely collapse, probably. And so the comments about resilience and defensibility need to be first-order considerations. And so our shared services model is fundamentally about defensibility and shared services, so that's one strain. The second is that what we're advocating for with the federal government is twofold. Number one, there's a program called the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program that will be a test on acronyms after the session. And that is the most important federal program for giving money to states and local governments to improve the defensibility of their systems. Should be expanded, should be easier to use, and should be made in the long term. And number two is deterrence. We're already seeing a fundamental shift in how cyber deterrence is or is not working. And nation states, which previously were the ones that could do very bad things, that took a very long time, that depended on a lot of exploit cheating and detailed expertise, and fly to a foreign country to talk to the one expert to do the one thing in the one place, that's not going to be true anymore. And so how you have to defend against an adversary that fundamentally has a different algebra of deterrence than a nation state is the question for how we together, right? Because these threats do not respect the borders between states, they do not respect the boundaries between organizations, and they do not respect international border law.
On this algebra of deterrence.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit from your CTO hat, how you're thinking about everyone from the product, you mentioned MSPs, but the different kind of lines of security and defense, Mike, that we've got today, and how their role may or may not need to change, and who needs to talk to each other in this sort of increasingly converged environment on security. It's not just the MSP's got to talk to the OEM, it's a much bigger story. So how do you see that security and defense ecosystem changing with the threat?
Oh, it's going to completely change. It's changing now. Your story about the CISO thinking he was proud for bringing up the prototypes. I'm surprised he didn't get fired in the meeting. The worst job to have in a plant right now is the CISO. And it's going to continue to be the worst job on the planet for at least the next couple of years. The deterrence doesn't exist right now for what was just discussed. Doesn't exist. Now, does that mean that we're going to, let's just tell some funny stories, patch our way out of this? Absolutely not. Not going to happen. There's no clock that exists for the patching cycle that we have today. Are we going to fund our way out of this? Well, potentially we could, only if we decide we're going to change the way we actually operate. And the way we operate is that we're going to have to take the CISO job and break it into 10 pieces. That's what's going to happen. For the larger organizations, for the smaller ones, it's going to go back to the MSP because they can't afford to do this, and certainly not on scale. Because I think Nick said scale 4 times, which is that's the real problem, is that the attack surface now is attacked by scaling actors. And the smaller players are in deep, deep trouble.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes. I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds or so to answer this final question. There's such a discussion right now on how monumental this shift is in security. I think people are shorthanding Mythos as a way to do that, but it's way bigger than that. I don't mean to just kind of pin it on you on this, but we have a lot of people here who are seasoned in seeing these different shifts and have heard the word inflection point, more times than they can think. What is the current discussion missing? Maybe it's basic, maybe it's new. And if it's not, what are they missing? What do you want to highlight that's being said and not being said loud enough? Colin, start with you.
I think, just very shortly, I think as a security practitioner, this is probably the most consequential period in the last 15 years, probably since the emergence of cryptocurrency. I think your mental model should be somewhere between credit cards at the low end, the printing press at the middle, and fire. Right? So that's a pretty broad spectrum in terms of...
Give us your last one again.
Fire.
Fire,
In terms
okay.
of how it's going to change the security discipline, right? Credit cards change everything a little bit and something a lot. That's clear. The printing press, you could reimagine entire ways of doing business, and fire, you can't even imagine what life was like before it, right? So as a security practitioner, we don't know where in that spectrum it's going to fall and how fast it's going to change, but we're pretty sure it's going to be somewhere in this, in this rubric.
All right, Colin's scale of change. Go for it, Rob.
I totally agree with Colin. I think the one thing the conversation is missing, though, is we still need to be brilliant at the basics. I mean, we heard patches, we can't patch our way out of this, but the bottleneck is no longer finding vulnerabilities. The bottleneck is getting patches to the endpoints to ensure we're giving defenders the advantage. And that's something that, you and I as practitioners have struggled with for decades. And I think, we've got to figure out a way to get those patches into the hands of the CNC machines in rural United States. That's what's going to make a difference against these non-nation state attackers.
Great.
I mean, I'll build on that. I think it's knowledge and awareness, and what I mean by that is I felt like we had a decent runway with cloud computing, right? We had a little bit of time to discuss and debate. Do we want it? Did I want it on-prem? Did I want it in the cloud? What is the cloud, et cetera? We didn't have that luxury here, right? Everything happened so fast. And I think what's important is, and again, as auditors, we're professional storytellers to a degree, right? We're conveying how trust is earned, but in order to convey trust, people have to understand what's working, what's in the basics, what's in the nuances, what's different, and to be able to continue that education, whether it starts at college, it starts at high school, we all have to be better versed in what is out there in order to be able to assess and respond to what's happening.
I think everybody should introduce a civil engineer to an IT professional today. That will help our ability to protect critical infrastructure faster than anything else we do, because the two organizations don't know each other and they're antithetical to each other and their goals.
All right. Thank you all so much for a great discussion. A lot of ground to cover.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks to Hannah Haynes, Keelan Wolf, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI CTC team in helping us produce today's episode. Be on the lookout every Monday and Wednesday for more sessions from the National Cyber Innovation Forum. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks again.